2 weeks ago, I said that in John's Gospel, the first and the last visit of Jesus to Jerusalem was during the time of Passover. And we read from his first visit for the last 2 weeks. And now we read about his last visit in this week's reading. Because this week's reading really takes place right after he entered Jerusalem to die actually there, which is the event that we will just observe next week. The Palm Sunday is about Jesus' entrance to Jerusalem in a spectacular way. But the order of the reading is reversed to fit the church calendar. So this week actually we are reading the event of this Sunday's reading is actually event that took place in the Holy Week. Jesus is already in Jerusalem and it's only about 4 or 5 days before his death. And he is talking to people. And as it is in the week before Passover, again the Passover theme is showing in today's reading, both as Jesus as a Passover lamb and as God saving his people from oppression and sin. It said that some Greeks came. Greeks was kind of a general term of Jews calling non-Jews, because it was a Roman Empire. So anybody who's not Jews, they thought, they belong to the Roman Empire, which was commonly called Greeks actually. So they are Greeks. But they came to Jerusalem because they really worshipped God. They believed in God. At the same time, they haven't become Jews by being circumcised, because if they had been circumcised, they would be called Greeks. So they came to Jerusalem to worship, and apparently they heard about Jesus. So they want to see Jesus, but they are kind of afraid because they know of Jesus as Jewish teacher. So Jewish teacher wouldn't really want to see us Greeks. So they just asked one of the disciples, Philip, and asked him, can we see Jesus? Well, I guess Philip wasn't quite sure either. How would Jesus really see Greeks? So he asks Andrew. He goes to Andrew and says, could you just go ask with me? Because I'm not quite sure whether Jesus will say yes. So Philip and Andrew go together and ask Jesus, can these Greeks really see you? Well, it is quite interesting that John doesn't say whether Jesus said yes or no. Well, I'm quite sure that Jesus said yes, but John is not interested in recording this, but says something completely different. Jesus replied, the time has come for the human one to be glorified. And John calls this reply. Jesus is replying and saying, the time has come. Well, Philip and Andrew asked about these Greeks. So why does Jesus say this? The time has come for the human one to be glorified. Because Jesus came to this earth to really give this good news to all people, not just Jews. For now, Greeks seeking Jesus is a sign that his ministry on this earth is over. Now the disciples can take it over now from him. And especially with the two of his disciples actually asking for this from him. So now disciples even start to get the idea of this, that his good news is not just for the Jews. So Jesus says it's time then. It's time for him to depart. But he doesn't say it's time for me to depart or it's time for me to die, but it says the time has come for the human one, which is, he refers to himself, to be glorified. So this means that he sees his death as glorification. He sees his death as his glory. Because this will save the world. This will save whole people. And this will start a new covenant that Jeremiah talked about in our Old Testament reading. the new covenant is starting. As we say in our prayer, the communion prayer, Thanksgiving prayer, that we say, this is the cup of my new covenant. So he will start the new covenant. The time that he will start the new covenant has come. So therefore, that is his glory. And he says this, I assure you that unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it can only be a single seed. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. And Jesus is talking about himself here. So he's saying, unless I die, then there's no purpose of me coming here. But when I die, it will achieve a great deal in God's kingdom. And while he's talking about himself through these words, as he continues his words, we can see that this also applies to his followers, his servants, as he calls them. Because it says, first, those who love their lives will lose them, and those who hate their lives in this world will keep them forever. This is a kind of ironic saying. Jesus, how is it that one who loves lives will lose, and the one who hates lives will gain? Doesn't seem to make sense, but Jesus uses irony a lot in his speeches. So when he says those who love their lives, he means those who just love their lives improportionally, or those who love only their lives. In other words, those who are selfish. They think their lives are more important than other people's lives, or they think their lives are more important than their commitment to God. And Jesus says they will lose their lives. And those who hate their lives, of course, Jesus doesn't mean that we should really hate our lives because it is God-given gifts. So we shouldn't really hate our lives, but he's saying those who are willing to even give up their lives, they will gain it. They will keep them forever. And he explains it further by saying, whoever serves me must follow me. Wherever I am, there my servant will also be. Well, Jesus just talked about his death now. So when he says, follow me, or wherever I am, he's talking about death. So he's saying, whoever follows me should die. Basically, that's what he's saying. Well, he's not saying that every believer, every Christian should be a martyr. We cannot really volunteer to be a martyr. It's only when somebody really kills us for our faith that we can be a martyr. We cannot volunteer to be a martyr. But as one wise man, or maybe more than one wise man said, it is maybe easy to die for God once. It is harder to die for him every day. It means that we have to really kill our desires every day to serve God, or every hour, every minute. Dying to self means that we live sacrificially. Even the good desires we kill because our service to God takes priorities. For example, we want to enjoy our good food and enjoy many good holidays, enjoy some comfortable life, all these things. But we say, no, I'm not going to just hold on to this because there are poor people and maybe I can give with this by saving from all these things to the poor and help them. This is the kind of death that Jesus is talking about. For the sake of others, I will give up many of the things that I enjoy so that God's kingdom will grow. And he says, my Father will honor whoever serves me. So while we give up lots of things on this earth, for the sake of God's kingdom, there's great reward waiting for us. Because the honor that God gives is really great. What is greater than this? If God gives us honor, that is the greatest reward that we can get. And God will give that to those who live sacrificially, who give up their lives. Then Jesus says, now I am deeply troubled. So this shows even for Jesus, death was not an easy thing. He was deeply troubled when he was thinking about his death that's coming soon. Well, we might think, oh, Jesus is God, so death might be easy thing for him. But Jesus is also human. So death didn't come easily for him. So Jesus is not saying, well, this is easy thing for you, so I will just die, but I know it's a hard thing for you, but you should still die. Jesus is saying, it is difficult for me, and I'm going through that. And if I'm going through this, although it is difficult for me, you should do the same thing as well. I know it is difficult to give up many things, but you should still do that. Jesus was so troubled that our Hebrews writing, our New Testament writing, talks about prayer and request with loud cries. Well, although this can apply to other of his prayers for other people, I'm sure the Hebrew writer is also talking about Jesus' prayer for himself as well, as he was troubled. And Jesus says after that, what should I say? Father, save me from this time? No, for this reason I have come to this time. So Jesus is resisting the temptation not to die. Jesus doesn't pray to God, Father, save me from this time. Because he knows that's what he should do. And he says, for this reason I have come to this time. In other words, Jesus was born to die on the cross. Jesus lived all this life and ministered to other people for this purpose, to die on the cross. That's his ultimate goal, to die on the cross. So instead of saying, Father, save me from this time, Jesus says, glorify your name. And God answers, I have glorified it and will glorify it again. In other words, Jesus saw his death as glory, his glory, but it is also God's glory, Father's glory. Because Father said, I have glorified it and will glorify it again, meaning that he glorified his name through Jesus' ministry, and he will glorify it even more at Jesus' death. And this voice came from heaven. So other people heard it as well. Apparently, John heard it very clearly that he recorded this. That's why Jesus said, this voice came for your benefit, not for mine, but for your benefit, that people will hear that God is glorified in Jesus. But interestingly, some people thought that this was a thunder, while others said it was angel speaking. So these people said this is angel speaking, probably heard the voice. But those people who said this was thunder didn't really understand the voice that well. Why? Because they didn't want to hear. We humans have a very interesting ability that we can shut up our ears if we don't want to hear. And they didn't want to hear, so they didn't hear. So they just said it was just thunder. And that's true even today. There's really strong evidence that Jesus is the Son of God. There's strong evidence that he died on the cross and he rose from the dead. But people do not want to hear. So they just shut their ears and say, oh, it never happened. Only those who are willing to hear, those who want to hear, will hear. And Jesus now says, now is the time for judgment of this world. Now this world's ruler will be thrown out. So Jesus' death will accomplish the judgment of this world, all the bad judgment of this world, of the bad things of this world, including the ruler of this world, which is Satan. So Satan will be thrown away because of Jesus' death. Well, he has been thrown out because of Jesus' death, but not completely. That's why Satan is still in power, in action in our days. But once he was just sentenced to be thrown out through Jesus' death, he will be completely thrown out sometime when Jesus comes back, to be specific. And Jesus further says, when I'm lifted up from earth, I will draw everyone to me. So Jesus' death draws people to him. It is true that Jesus in his lifetime too, he drew people. But Jesus' death will draw more people. And it says everyone. So you might be surprised, saying, well, not everyone is drawn to Jesus. Not everyone believes in Jesus. But when Jesus said draw, it doesn't really mean that everyone will believe, but he will still draw them, whether they resist or not. So everyone is still invited, although not everyone believes. So Jesus draws everyone. And particularly when he said everyone, the hearers of this time will probably were thinking about non-Jews. Because people were just thinking, the great needs of God is mainly for the Jews. But Jesus will draw non-Jews as well. All people from all races. Jesus' good news is for everyone, from every race, from every social background, from all different groups. And John makes a comment saying this was to show how he was going to die. Because he said, when I'm lifted up, so his dying is really being lifted up on the cross. But I think Jesus is showing more than the manner of his execution. He's saying his death will draw everyone to me. That's how he'll die. He won't die just as a criminal, but he will die to draw other people. So let us make this clear, that Jesus came to this earth to die. Jesus' death is really the greatest event in history, along with his resurrection. That's why Good Friday and Easter combined, it is the greatest part of the church calendar, the most important day of church calendar. And his death has really accomplished many things. I won't say that it is the greatest event unless it had really accomplished things. And what is it? He died for us. So he opened the gate of heaven and by forgiving us. But that's not what it says exactly in our reading. He has done other things as well. He glorified himself and God through his death. Death, what others considered defeat, was actually glorification for him. And he threw Satan out. So with his death, Satan is now defeated. And we can just overcome all the sins because Satan is defeated. That's what his death accomplished. And he draws everyone to him. He draws people. He invites people. So with his death, we can come to him. Actually, all of us came to him, came to God because of his death. Because I don't think there's any Jew here. So we are drawn to him because of Jesus' death. So that's what he accomplished. But his death didn't just accomplish great benefit for us, but his death also calls us to follow him. Because that's what he said. Wherever I am, there my servant will also be. So we have to follow the way of the cross. In other words, we are called to live sacrificially. We Christians are not people who just live to satisfy our desires, to satisfy what we want. Many people have an approach of thinking that it is not, as long as we don't live sinfully, that's okay. So people often ask me or other ministers saying, is doing this thing, is it sin? I think the implication is usually, well, if it's not sin, I will do it. But then my answer is, Christians shouldn't really ask just whether it's sin, but whether it's the best thing to glorify God. Whether this is really the best thing that I should do to follow God. And we should live sacrificially if we are truly Jesus' disciples. So let us do that and glorify Him in all things. Glory be to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.